it while we stand aside and look. Some say it's just a part of it. We got to fulfill the book. Won't you as the same? These songs of freedom, that's all I ever had. Redemption song, all I ever had. Redemption song, the songs of freedom, the songs of freedom.
Good morning or afternoon or evening to everyone who's with us today. Welcome to session 53. I've heard that there were some issues with some of the links in open water. So if you're expecting session 52, this is session 53, Decoloniality, an Experiment in Delinking and Reexisting, a cross-cultural doctoral course. My name is Aaron Baker, and along with my colleagues, we're going to talk through our experience that we had this last semester in a cross-cultural dynamics course with professors Olan Rewaju and Jimenez. But before we get started, we want to kind of ground ourselves and really come together as a community here in this space. So I'm going to lead us in an activity, and much like there was a meditation exercise or grounding exercise in the plenary last night, where one of the purposes of it is to really connect with the knowledge that we embody. That's very similar to this activity. Instead of focusing on meditation, though, we're focusing on movement. And this was one of the first activities that we engaged in as a class in our cross-cultural dynamics course. It was led by Andrew from Park-On Resilience. And Andrew promotes Park-On Resilience promotes an improvisational, interdisciplinary, body-centered approach to co-create anti-racist culture and curriculum. And with Andrew, my classmates and I were taken out of the usual academic script in order to get oriented within our body, to take into consideration how we felt within the setting, and to affirm that feelings matter and are important to creating a sacred space for ourselves. So we want to try to engage in this type of activity with everyone here in this space. Like I said, this exercise is based in movement. And for me, back when we took this class, that was a little bit nerve-wracking for me. I have a lot of range of motion limitations because I had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis growing up and still have arthritis to this day. And actually the day of our class, I had gallbladder removal surgery. And so, when I heard, when I logged on, like, oh, we're going to do this activity with movement with this person who does parkour for a living, my mind just went in a million different directions. But what was really cool about this activity is it's moving as you are. If you aren't able to, jump around and do parkour, that's okay. It's less about what's happening outside of you and more about what's happening within you and what knowledge is within yourself. And so through the guidance of Andrew, I was able to find a degree of movement that helped me kind of connect with things that I was feeling in the moment. And what's cool about this activity was that we didn't just do it for a grounding exercise, but it was used to kind of it was the foundation for us to work together. We used it to evaluate community expectations and dialogue about them, how we wanted to kind of engage with each other. Earlier, you might have seen that we had posted the virtual community agreement. And so it's something similar like that, where we're actually engaging with each other. But instead of always only using some outside kind of knowledge, we were able to really tap into our embodied perspectives. And the way we did that was we would engage in movement, we were moving, and then someone would say, like, propose a community expectation. And then we would focus on that while we were moving. And as we're moving, we're thinking about how we're feeling, and we're thinking about what we're hearing from our body. And we ultimately evaluated those expectations on a yes, no, modify paradigm. So yes, I'm feeling really positive about this community expectation, and it, I agree with it, or no, I don't feel aligned with this expectation. I think we should reject it or modify. It's like I kind of there, but I'm feeling a little tension inside, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but let's dialogue to figure out how we can maybe move that to a yes or to a no. So as we get started, I'm hoping that we can do this just at a small scale together here in this space. So we're hoping for your willingness to participate so that we can connect all of us together and bring us into this space, make this space sacred for ourselves. So we're just going to engage in some movement. So I invite you to do that. If you want to, whatever is comfortable for you, you can move in your chair, you can move, you can get up, move around. And you can put yourself on video mute, you can mute yourself on audio, whatever is the most comfortable for you. But I'm gonna stand up, I'm gonna move around. Let me just rearrange where my workstation real quick. So okay, so basically in this activity, you just kind of start moving. Like, we're not focusing on music, we're just kind of focusing on ourselves, focusing on our bodies, what's comfortable for us. You just kind of do some movement, see what's comfortable for you. For me at the time, I was doing a lot of like small arm movements, and that felt really good for me. I remember watching Andrew, who's a parkour, professional parkour person. He was doing all sorts of movements, which were really cool to watch, but really focusing on ourselves. And then after a while, what we'll do is we'll say a statement. And the statement I'm going to say to you, and I want you just to focus on it, is I'm proposing a community expectation of listening for understanding. And just think about listening for understanding and what it means to you. Feel how your body is kind of responding to that. When you're ready, when you feel like you've kind of felt knowledge or perspectives coming up from within your body, go ahead and give a thumbs up or thumbs down on the Zoom reactions, or a yes or no, whichever ones are available. How you're feeling. Yes, you like it. No, it's not good for you right now. Okay. So that's just a taste. You can return. We're only going to do one statement. But we wanted to just start out kind of experiencing a little bit about what we experienced in this class in order to really give some insight into our experience. So I'm curious, is anybody done anything similar to this type of activity before? Did anybody have, go ahead.
Many years ago, I did some eurythmy, the Rudolf Steiner approach to expression and understanding through movement that I think was similar to this. More stylized, I mean, that, not just however you wanted to move. There were certain types of movements you were expected to engage in, but.
Very cool. Did anybody, when they heard the statement, listen for understanding, feel no or modify as they were moving?
I felt a bit of no. More yes, but a bit of no.
Yeah. And so in this paradigm that Andrew kind of explained to us, he talked about modify is kind of yes, but we just need to explore some of the aspects of this and unpack it a little bit more so that everyone in the space can move it to yes, or discount it. And the reason why we chose listen for understanding is very broad, and it means a lot of different things for people, and it can be weaponized also as well. And so, it's not just because seems like it's going to be a good norm for us as a community. We won't know until we come together and we experience it. So thank you for sharing. Before we move on, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is sometimes the movement is, it feels differently for us. I remember, one person in our session when we were in class saying that when they were experiencing big movements, it felt like it was yes, there was a resounding expression. Whereas for me in the moment, I was feeling a lot of downward movements, and that kind of made me feel like I'm grounded and I feel comfortable with what is being discussed, versus like upward movements being more like entropic, chaotic, going into space kind of feeling. So it really is about what makes sense for each of us, and then how do we come together and experience that in this space. So thank you again, everyone, for participating in this introductory activity. I'd like to pass it on to Tiffany to take on the next section and talk about the course foundations.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Jimenez. My familial connections are from Chihuahua, Mexico, and Northern Europe. I'm a first generation to receive a doctoral degree in my family and associate professor at National Louis University. I wanted to first start off with a land acknowledgement. Erin, if you could advance the slide. Many of us understand the importance of this, but to recognize the land as an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on this land time immemorial. We want to acknowledge that NLU's main campus, and where I sit today, is located in the Chicago area of Illinois, US, which places it within the lines of the traditional homelands of many Native American tribes, such as the Miami, the Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox. But we not only want to acknowledge the place in which NLU and my home sits today, but also the resources used to make today's session possible. I think these are the things we don't think about. But Zoom is a company that has a headquarters that are based in San Jose, California. We honor the Ohlone indigenous peoples that have had to continue to reside within those homelands. We also acknowledge the people that have been part of the production of the materials that make up the computer behind which we all sit, including coppers, gold, aluminum, and zinc. And computer parts and hardware predominantly come from Southeast Asia, places like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Taiwan, known for their heavy industry and large-scale mass production. So we hope not to forget those who have struggled in these places at the cost of capitalism and globalization. You can move the slide. So today we're here to talk about this course, LAP 670, PhD class called Cross-Cultural Communication and Global Dynamics. And how did we get here? I do want to, if we move to the next slide, just start with a bit of history. Acknowledging that we are embedded in a long history of colonization and Eurocentrism. I don't want to go through this in detail. You can see the sort of major events here: denial of culture, destruction of artifacts, denigration of local people, exploitation, extractivism. It goes on, based on a history of Eurocentrism. So let's move to the next slide. But all of this, I think, moves into this history of universities in the United States. And we're positioned at this university within the U.S. But I think it's important to recognize and remember that U.S. higher education was developed in the context of settler colonialism, educating for the purposes of colonizing, based on the development of civilization based on a Eurocentric vision, that Native Americans were involved to the extent to which they could be part of a process of erasure of their indigenous knowledges and ways of being. And only white Christian males were allowed to matriculate, where women and African Americans were denied this participation. I have some history of some of the different political acts that have led to the shift in education over time. So if we can move to the next slide, I think it's important to be thinking about culture in terms of its history and as a concept within the United States. So we think about culture and we think about diversity maybe, but the history of diversity in the United States in universities has gone through some shifts where we've started with the idea of multiculturalism, diversity, and now we're thinking about institutions in terms of racialization, where we have a university that's designated based on the racial ethnic identities of the students in which they serve, or high percentages in which they serve. So we have entities like Hispanic serving institutions, historically Black colleges, universities, and tribal colleges. But what is the responsibility of racialized or all higher education institutions within the larger historical development of universities around the globe? So, thinking a little bit more about National Louis, we're kind of zoning in here. You know, we're a fairly small university and very diverse. We have a high percentage of minority group status social groups, about 50%, and about 50% first generation students. And our adult learners make up the highest amount of our doctoral and graduate education level. So there's a ton of information within our students we want to build on and highlight and bring into the course experience. So if we go to the next slide, this is just a description of the course in general on the syllabus. So just a little bit of a history here. This class was not within a global context, and it's still not technically, if you go to the paperwork on the class at the university, it's not a global class. I'd say my teaching of the class is an act of fugitivity at the university here, but it's also sort of serendipitous maybe in the sense that we had our first international cohort of doctoral students in the PhD community site program this year. Due to the pandemic situation, we were really building on this up as an opportunity. So this is the description of the course technically, and I didn't change any of this, but I did completely shift in trying to de-link from the usual way that you might think to be teaching about culture. I mean, we often want to think about culture very dynamically, but you know, it's often embedded in the categorization and classifications of difference and these characteristics that disconnect us from one another. And so this course was based more on a relational framework. So I will move on to that. And I think, you know, the only quote I really want to focus on here is the one by Paulo Freire, where we see that, or he says that what the educator does in teaching is to make it possible for the students to become themselves. And I think that was really my goal here, was to go deeper into who we are and how we can build upon those strengths. So if we go to the next slide, again, this is NLU's first international community site PhD cohort. And given that case, we thought it was appropriate to really build on the locations of our students. And you know, one of our students is in Cairo, and actually she couldn't attend the course due to her situation with the pandemic, but we are bringing her in other ways now. But also I want to go back to the ideology of this course. I think when I found this book, this main text that we used on decoloniality concepts, analytics, and praxis about 3 years ago, probably, yeah, 2019, maybe just when it came out at the bookstore here in Chicago. I remember I shared it with my colleague, Chris on in Australia, and we read pieces of this together. And he was about to be teaching a course there in Australia, Melbourne, Australia, and was really kind of dreading it because of the usual way we might teach a culture course. And so then we together decided, you know, why don't we flip it and use this text and focus on a decolonial framework? And so I co-taught the course with him in Melbourne, Australia, and I was so inspired by how that went that I took back the culture course here at National Louis, threw the global emphasis on it, reframed it from a decolonial perspective, and we used this as our major text for the course. But other than that, the course that occurred in Chicago and through that international group was co-designed with Dr. Olanriwaju, which I think was super important in the design of this. His insight was just beautiful in what he's contributed to the design. So I think he's going to speak more to that. But in general, the foundations of this course were based on liberation and decolonial principles and ideas, and Relationships was the focus, so connection, where do we overlap, how are we unique, but how do we connect? And then emergent, we really let things emerge from week to week based on particularly the speakers that we highlighted every week, depending on their relationship with the topic. Okay, so maybe go to the next slide. So this gives you a sense of the different regions that were involved. We had stories that spanned across several geographic locations from Mexico, West Africa, Korea, Japan, South Africa, Nigeria, Barbados, various points of Latin America, and Southwest Asia, North Africa. If we go to the next slide, you can see that we have a map. We've created a Padlet map that identifies our different locations. I think, Erin, if you can help me with this, there's a link to this map that you can actually take a peek at and go in and click on these different icons. The green represents our origins, and the red represents where we are today. Orange tabs, I maybe should have picked better colors for those of us with color challenges, but there are orange tabs in there that would indicate some points on the map where the storyline had points of contact. So this is still a work in progress. We're still building on this, but if you click on some of these pieces, you'll notice that there are links to websites and pictures to learn more about these people and locations. To give a little bit more emphasis, the next slide will show you who was involved. So the course was only 6 weeks long, and we did the first 2 of us in the first week to sort of set the stage for the course. And then we had Andrew do the Recovering Embodied Agency, and then Ji-Yoon Lee was an artist who brought about her walking tours. Christopher San talked about his journey from South Africa into Australia, and a little bit about his work as a community psychologist. Bayo Komalafe, he's a teacher, psychologist, author, poet, and speaker, and was located in India. El Cambalache, non-hierarchical anti-capitalist decolonial economics group was amazing to have, and we learned so much from them. And then Rami Baruch also joined us, storyteller, social transformation interests, decoloniality enthusiast, who is here with us today, may be able to speak more to his experience with the course, but he was also one of our speakers. So yeah, but we curated the relationships with all of these folks in an effort to really bring people who exemplified some type of embodiment of decoloniality, people who maybe not even would call it that, but are on the path to doing more and more of unpacking themselves and their relationship to the world in this way. And then I will pass this off to Bashud.
Thank you, Tiffany. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all here today. It's not every day that one is invited to co-create an emergent curriculum. You know, I've gone through this course myself, at least the regular one. This is a global dynamic one, but the regular one, I've gone through it just a year before when I was a student. This looks nothing compared to what I went through. So this gave me a very good space to also learn a lot. I want to share the syllabus just so that I can, you guys can see the material, the artifact that we covered. Do I have the right to do that, Aaron? Yeah, I think I do. Okay. So for week 1, it was the week was called, you know, the education. So this is sort of introduction, you know, even though the main text was Magnolia and Watch on decoloniality, we felt we can get through this without introducing what Aaron has already talked about, Andrew doing the embodied epistemology. He brought it from North America. We covered Tiffany, Dr. Tiffany covered experience, both from how she grew up in Mexico to what she's doing in North America right here. And I introduced this concept of, this paper is called The African Concept of Human Personality. I have a feeling like this course, since it's, you know, re-existing, there's no way we can talk about this without talking about the African concept of person, going beyond mind and body, at least the dualism of it, you know. So this paper was a good frame, and I think students enjoyed it so much from the discussion. Week 2, we brought in Yun Lin. I think it was a bit risky, I must say, because I was thinking, would students grapple with somebody coming in to that the work she does is activism, that all she does is just walk about. So I was thinking it was a bit risky, but after she came and she explained what she does and the way she does it, and even the weight of reference that she brought for us, I'm tempted to share some of these because each of them has a different de-education and re-assisting knowledge according to what we're trying to create. But I won't, because of time, I won't be able to share all of it. But I wanted the visualization for you guys to see how many, the wealth of material that we cover. In week 3, Christian, as Tiffany has mentioned, brought us Bob Marley, both, I think the one that speaks about love and war, and as he explains his critical frame that he used to teach in Australia, and his history from being a South African guy. Week 4, I'm not sure how many people here know Dr. Bayo Akomolafe. We're talking about becoming fugitive, which is something that Tiffany told me from the beginning of the course, that's what we are doing. Bayo is so much into looking at diffractions, looking at cracks, and so we brought him in to talk about that and all of his work. These are some of his materials too. And in week 4, we started, students started telling their story. One of them that really kind of caught me was, I believe it was Shaya's story, where she was talking about air. And if you all know,
I'm gonna get to that.
Oh,
next,
you're gonna do that? Okay, so don't let me know. Let me spoil your show. Okay, yeah. Week 4, we brought Ekamalashe from I believe they're from Colombia. They are practicing a radical way of where are they from?
Chiapas.
Chiapas, yeah. They are practicing a different way of economic decoloniality, the colonial economy. This is a system whereby they create where they don't use money, they don't use anything. All of this seems very related to this course because there's no way you can talk about resisting without taking off what you already know. That's why we brought each of these speakers from this different region and see the way they practice decoloniality from their different region. Ramni is on the call here today, I think. We brought him also to talk about the Middle East, and he's a graduate student in Lebanon, in Canada right now, but he gave us the geopolitical, when you're talking about decoloniality in terms of the global region, he gave us, the history of the of what it means to be to embody that from the Middle East. So these are additional reference materials. As you can see, there are a lot. It's not so that we thought people can get through this, but the more we gave access to all this material, the better it was for students. And it wasn't forced, but each week you can see students coming back with excitement that they want to learn more, because this is not familiar. This is not similar to what we've seen on the menu in each of the courses that they've taken in their doctoral education. So I think who is going next? Is D here?
So it would be me. And Erin, can you put back up the slides, please? Hi, everyone. So I am here twice because my electricity happened to have gone off about an hour ago. So I'm on my phone just in case the hotspot I'm working off of doesn't work. My name is Shania Gray, and I was a student of this class, and I want to say this class was very impactful. It was impactful to all of the students who took the class. not just because of the head knowledge we gained, but the knowledge that we also embodied, and that I would wage to say forever changed our lives, how we approach our worldview, and even how we approach research, which you'll hear a little bit more about that later. This was the first class as a doctoral student and as an educator myself. This was really the first class where I felt it really was that feeling of belonging and understanding. And it really was a very, very powerful class. And so many of us have walked away really impacted by the class. For me, so I am from the island of Barbados, and I wanted to share one of the most impactful things for the class is that not only did we have to understand the concepts, but we had to apply them to our lives. And so the concept of decoloniality in my life, I'm going to share what that looked like in a moment here. So for me, I talked a little bit about the standards of beauty because this has been a lifelong journey for me, a lifelong story. If you Google beautiful and you look at the images that come up, you're not going to find images necessarily that look like me. Okay, you're going to find our world has painted the colonial standards of beauty. Often it's the lighter skin, the thin nose, the straight long hair. And so for a very long time, even growing up on the island of Barbados, this 90% Black, as a biracial Caribbean woman, I struggled with my identity. I struggled with who I was because yes, I have certain features that lend a little bit towards being European, but then my hair never was there. And so growing up in proximity to what I was told was beautiful, but I didn't quite meet that. I really struggled with that identity issue my whole life. So in the class, when we had to present our story, I shared this story with my classmates, and I talked a little bit about, so this is me here in nursery school growing up in Barbados. And so what are the beauty standards? So I had the lighter skin, the thin nose, but I didn't have the straight, long flowing hair, and having family members that had that. And I was told, everything's good with you. You have the right skin texture, everything except your hair isn't there. And so I would pray, like, Lord, why did you make me this way? Why does my hair look this way? I even one time thought to myself, well, if my hair is straightened when I conceive, then maybe my baby will have straight long hair. So it really messed with my identity because I felt something was wrong with me and I was not beautiful or deserving because I had this beauty standard that the world had created for me. And even those in my inner circle had felt was beautiful. So next slide. So I'd been on this journey for a really long time, from childhood on, and I've tried many different hairstyles and everything like that to figure out what was perfect for me, what would work for me, what would make me feel more beautiful. And this is my sister here on the left, and as you can see, she has the long flowing hair. And so in proximity to her and learning that she had the good hair, that was the story I grew up with. And it was only in my late teenage years that I really started to embrace who I was and how I had been fully created, and to understand that this was okay and that this was fine and that this was good. But it took me a really long time to get to that because I had embodied this colonial standard and I needed to delink myself from it. I needed to pull away from this concept that had been embedded in my mind and throughout my society and throughout the world, in TV images, in magazines and so on, about what beautiful looked like. And so I was on that journey for years and years. And then finally in 2015, I really came to that place where I chose to lock my hair, right? And at the beginning, we played the song by Bob Marley, the Redemption Song, which talks about emancipate yourself from mental slavery. And so me locking my hair in 2015 was my way of saying, hey, this is who I am. I'm going to embrace and like who I am. And this is what I am meant to be. and this was something that, again, was not accepted by my family or my parents and so on. It's like, why are you locking your hair? It was not something that is perceived as acceptable in society. And so it had been a journey for me. And so even when I got to this class, I felt even more liberated, and it freed me even more to really become my authentic self and to be who I am, and to understand that I am existing within parameters that have been put on me because of colonialism, and that I can slowly separate myself and delink myself so that I can feel valued, I can feel worthy, I can feel like who I am. So this class for me was life-changing, and continues to be, and continues to impact me. And my wish is that more faculty and more institutions will embody and learn approaches such as what Tiffany Jimenez took for this class, that really students, especially color, but all students, in community psychology programs, because it really is where we need to go for cross-cultural. So now I will go ahead and pass on to, would it be Anne? Let me go ahead and pass on.
I think it's Carrie. Carrie's next. Yeah.
It's me. Good morning from Nova Scotia, Canada. Good afternoon, actually, from Nova Scotia, Canada. It's lunchtime here. I'm Carrie Patterson. I'm living in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people in Eastern Canada. And I grew up, I'm settler descent woman. My family came from Germany and the UK in the early 1900s to the prairies. So I grew up in the prairies in Treaty 6 territory, and I'm here now in Nova Scotia. And I'm one of the international cohort. I'm one of the people outside the US who's participating in this international cohort for the first time, and it's a thrill for me. So I'm going to speak briefly to, sorry, I meant to start my timer here. I'm going to speak briefly to how I'm carrying the learnings that I gained from this course with me, and how it's impacting the way I am in the world. And I also just want to say, we learned so much from what was shared and the content of what people had to say, the speakers, the things we read and listened to and looked at. And not only did I learn so much from what was shared, the content that was shared, but the way we learned. So this class totally validated other ways of knowing that have moved me: art, poetry, music, movement, landscape, gut feeling. So it made this course, and the way Tiffany and Michoud taught the course made space for that. And that has validated a huge part of me in my learning journey. So the things that I'm doing now after being part of this class, I'm paying attention for the coloniality in me. So I've more focused on the past, on how to change the systems, the change that's needed outside me, and worked on that. And now I'm realizing through this class that I have more coloniality in me than I want or realized, and I need to pay attention to that and try to change that as I learn about myself. I'm also consciously honoring different ways of knowing. So in the spheres that I have influence over, I'm inviting, acknowledging, requesting, and trying to validate and honor many different ways of knowing. So when, for example, I recently interviewed a Mi'kmaq woman for a job, and when we were inviting people to be shortlisted for interviews, we said, we gave some homework ahead of time and said, you can write this answer to this question, you can do a poem, you can share a picture, you can address this question in whatever way works for you. So doing those kinds of things is validating those different ways of knowing. And in fact, in that case, everybody brought pictures. Nobody wrote the response to the pre-homework question. Being open and humble about my fumbles. So I I'm pushing myself to be honest about this because I'm embarrassed by this, but one of the things I did, I work in evaluation. And one of the things I did was I'm working with a Mi'kmaq evaluator, and we're evaluating a project that focuses on principles focused work to advance reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. And so I asked her to, I'm coaching this woman and helping her learn about evaluation. So I said, here's a framework. Can you please speak with the members of the strategic working group and ask them for their reflections on how the principles of this work are working, and get them to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 how much they think we're adhering to these principles in our work. So she took that away and she came back to me a few days later and she said, Carrie, I'm having trouble fitting my creator's gifts and teachings into a Western box on a 5-point scale. And when she said that, I could not believe I had asked her to do that. I was shocked. So this is me realizing the coloniality that's in myself that's so deeply embedded. So I'm speaking about those things so that I can create a space for learning, a brave space for people to grow and to learn and to challenge ourselves and to challenge each other. And I do that in my spheres of influence in my work. I've also created in my work a learning circle for new and emerging evaluators. And we're working together to support each other in our learning. And actually, when we were preparing our story sharing for this class, I shared my story with my learning circle first as a practice round and modeled being brave and taking risks and sharing your story. And the purpose of the stories we're sharing in our learning circle are to identify our lenses and our biases and how they came to be. And we're exploring together how they shape our work. So each person in the learning circle we're taking turns, everyone is sharing their stories. And then we're working with the lenses and biases that are identified through the story sharing. I'm also seeking many perspectives and really trying hard to listen, to understand, listen with an open heart. So actively trying to find perspectives that are different than mine and that don't agree with mine. It's easy to explore perspectives that are different than mine that I like, but it's more challenging to find perspectives that I don't like and try and understand them. In my research for the dissertation, I'm working on exploring the role of Western evaluators in decolonizing evaluation. And I'm learning, even as I prepare for that that's much more than decolonizing evaluation and filling a room with, I'm using an evaluation capacity building approach. So trying to help build the capacity of Black and Indigenous evaluators in particular to do evaluation in their communities and from their worldview perspective. But I'm learning that I don't want to just fill a room with more people who have evaluation skills. I'm learning by listening to other perspectives that I want to create an ecosystem of a different way of working together and doing evaluation. And also telling the story. So I've been encouraged to, I've started recently a blog series to tell the story of the journey of my learning and putting it out there to be humble and to learn and to invite participation, comments, observations, and stories from other people along the way. So those are some of the things I'm doing to try to continue deepening my knowledge and understanding of coloniality and how I carry it with me in the world. So now I'm going to pass over to Anne, who's going to talk about the impact, how the course has impacted her.
Hello, my name is Anne Smith, and I reside I live in Schaumburg, Illinois, but I'm originally from Nigeria in Africa. The picture on the side of the slide is actually, I was trying to show where I was born with this gigantic rock. We live under that rock, but just a little bit of it is showing. So I came from, I was born in Nigeria in West Africa. My title say, who am I? And how did I get here? So in this class, I mean, when I started this program, one thing is I started asking myself, do I belong here? Can I speak the language or philosophical terms or the decoloniality and all that? So I started questioning myself, okay, why am I here? Do I belong here? Then I took this class, and it was a life changer. Why? I think Tiffany already described when we started the course, and Dr. Mashur did the same thing in the beginning. We started the course, and all the guest speakers, they were really impressed me. It's like something that I've never done before. I started the class, when I started the program, like I said, I started questioning myself. Do I belong here? Can I do this? But then here comes this class. I can't even talk in the presentation before this class because I get so nervous. Why do I get nervous? Because I really don't understand what I'm doing. So as I take this class, it started with Andrew with exercise and how you discover yourself. What that exercise did to me is how I discover myself. I already have the knowledge. I am smart. I'm a professional. But that didn't really spark in my head that, yeah, you are. But until we started going through all these speakers, all this exercise, then we started talking about coloniality. And then I started thinking, I think I discovered myself. I discovered I was aware of my identity. That, wait a minute, I'm already this. I just need to do more. I need to be aware of who I am. I need to be aware of what I can do. So what really impressed me the most, is about the, we read about Magnolia and Wash, and that really impressed me a lot because it was discussing about decoloniality, and I'm familiar with Matrix movie. I don't know if anyone has watched Matrix movie, and that really he really discussed about that movie in his writing, how decoloniality, how we can decolonialize what is going on around us. What has happened in that movie is the main actor of the movie, Leo, had to break out. It's like a fugitive. He broke out to see what was going on. So I kind of applied that to myself. You really need to use your knowledge and think, where are you? What are you doing? Is this where you want to be? So I started thinking. I think it was this class that I actually realized my identity, meaning the magnitude of what I can do as a human being, as who I am. So I say to myself, I'm a wonderful woman, I'm a mother, I'm a professional, I'm an advocate, I'm whoever I want to be. So this class really showed me. Now, it's not that I don't have this before, but it kind of, bring that out of me, who Anne is. And then I can take this to being a student at National University trying to be a community psychologist. How do I go from here? And this is really important in my career, in my future. Is the way I see myself. That's the way I can take that way and help other people and flourish in my career. So I really encourage, I know we are trying to tell everybody what this class is about. I know Dr. Tiffany kindly changed the curriculum from structured, learning to this wonderful of where you can be yourself, and you can be yourself to what you want to be. So it's really exciting to go through this class. It has impacted my private life too. The way I see myself is different, and I can go to any level. I can do anything that I want to do because Anne is Anne. And who is Anne? Anne is somebody who is smart, who can do anything. So this is kind of like an empowerment for me, and I really do appreciate taking the course. And this is my story, this is my experience, and it hasn't stopped there. I'm taking it on to the next level, to the next thing that I do. So thank you for listening. That's my story. That's I am. That's who I am. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Oh, wow.
So we wanted just to make sure everyone is aware, the way that we're modeling this presentation is we're trying to emulate and mirror the experience that we had in actual class, and that narrative, structure, discussion, we're going to get there very quickly, and horizontal decision making were very essential to this course. And so not only cognitively and academically thinking about decoloniality, but how are we practicing it at the same time? That being said, I think we think it's important that to provide a critical perspective of our experience. You're hearing a lot of positive experiences that we've had, and there were a lot of positive impact from the way that this course was shaped and emerged. But some challenges were that the key source text on Decoloniality by Mignolo and Walsh only refers to the last 500 years of history. One of our speakers actually attended to that at the very end of the course and gave a critique on that perspective. The other critical perspective that emerged at the end of the course and after the course as our cohort was reflecting on our experience as we moved on to other courses was that, the text, whether the Mignolo text or just sometimes some of the narratives came across as ways of blaming one source, when really, like, throughout history, there's been a long history of conflicts, and that, as community psychologists, we are trying to support community, and dividing isn't necessarily contributing to that cause. And so, that's important to think about as we move forward and think about how are we shaping this space to where we're attending to these critical perspectives and making sure that everyone who is entering into that space is comfortable with how they're engaging and their participation. Any other reflections, Tiffany, you wanted to provide?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add to this idea of the text really emphasizing the last 500 years of history. I think, I've had conversations with Rami quite a bit on this topic on the side, but that there is a long history, long before the sort of Western imperial settler colonial, time frame, that it gets lost. And I think some have said that really doesn't matter, that it really is this hegemonic taking over of the globe, globalization, that is really the thing to really focus on and really blame Eurocentrism for the problems that we're experiencing. And I think what some of our critical reflections were was like, we're kind of assuming that humans are good by nature, and that it was just those monstrous Europeans that really created this monstrous world that we're now having to deal with. And I think we believe it goes back further than that. And I'm not really sure whether humans are good by nature or not, right? We really go there with the questioning if you really go into it. And we don't know the answers, but we know that there's a lot of conflict that led to what we are experiencing today. And where did it start? And how do we identify the structures that are maintained, even when we want to say that Eurocentrism is the problem? We could say these ideological standpoints are the problem, or racialization is a problem, but it's really all part of a larger structure that needs a deeper analysis. And I think that's really where we felt like the text fell short, and we want to have a deeper understanding globally, historically.
Okay, so I think, Tiffany, we're moving on to discussion. So we want to open up lines of dialogue. We probably should have called it dialogue, really, because we know that people coming to this session, they're curious about what our experiment in decoloniality was, but probably are coming in with their own experiences. And so we want to, claim this space as a co-curricular space for all of us. One of the things that I wanted to share before we get started with discussion is this Padlet. So thank you for those of you who shared your locations. We wanted to kind of represent us in this space together. We're all across the globe, and so we added you all as best as we could to our map as we are in this experience together. This color here, it's blue or purple probably, or pink, dark pink, I'm not sure. But this color here represents the attended. What is it? Purple?
It's purple.
Okay, cool. I've colorblind, so there's some challenges with some of these color distinctions, but it's fine. I know it's not red, but that represents everyone, all the attendees, and then it's overlaid on the other narratives and stories of people that were represented in our course. So with that, we'll move into open discussion and see what thoughts everyone else has here. Who wants to go first?
I did
We
have
also have
more
one of our
reflection.
speakers today. Oh, I was going to say we also have Rami on with us today. I don't know if he has any reflections he wanted to share. He was one of our dynamic speakers in the class, and he was really powerful as he shared his story as well. Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. It's really nice to hear your perspectives and your experiences around that. I really enjoyed the setting of the presentation. When I presented at that time, I spoke a little bit about my experiences, whether they were the personal or professional experiences, and my journey from Lebanon to the US, then back to Lebanon, then back to the US, and back to Lebanon, then Canada. So there's a lot of movement within my journey, and people were really interactive when they were listening. And then after that, we had a discussion. So I really appreciate that setting of the class. And for me, that's how I usually function. And the most I can work within that kind of setting when there's that kind of, I don't know, vibe that allows, at least for me, it allows a lot of creativity, allows a lot of motivation to come in and just be part of the class. So I really appreciated that dynamic. And I do appreciate the critical aspects of the 500G that they mentioned. Because for me, I come from the Swana region, the Middle East, North Africa region, which we're moving away from Middle East to call it Southwest Asia now, to move from those kind of colonial kind of terminologies, which a lot of us in the Swana region still use Middle East, for example, even in Arabic, and we're used to that. And I do identify with what have said concerning the 500 years. And I feel that it excludes a lot of people, especially in North Africa, in Africa, and in Southwest Asia, rest of Asia, and even Eastern Europe. I feel that a lot of those conversations are just focused on one aspect of oppression, which has been disastrous in the way of how it harms, especially how it relates to, one, racism, two, capitalism, in the sense with those two coming together. But at least my experiences have been much more than just Western oppression. My experience have been Muslim/Arab oppression to a lot of minorities in the MENA region, for example, the Swana region. So, and those are just either ignored or turn into Islamophobic kind of rhetorics, which the West used. And there's no in between. It's either ignored because we want to focus on neoliberalism, we want to focus on capitalism, or the ultimate right, is talking about Islamophobia and being extremely bigoted towards the Muslim regions. So a lot of minorities, whether they were from Christian background, Jewish backgrounds, and I'm not talking about Israel, I'm talking about the minorities that have existed long before the creation of the State of Israel and long before the region was liberated from the Ottoman region, which was ruled for 500 years under the Ottoman Empire. So we don't talk about these dynamic and these oppressions because the priority always comes to what is Eurocentric. Even when we're talking about oppression, we're focusing that oppression on Eurocentrism without realizing. So I always appreciated my conversations with Tiffany and like also with Gordon Lee, which is not here. And then I appreciated that I had the venue to talk about that in that classroom. So just to clarify concerning these conversations, I thought maybe it would help. I definitely would love to see more classes set up like this. I would definitely feel much more comfortable in that. Like I usually hate course loads. I'm doing my PhD now at Wilfrid Laurier. I love the program. I just hate the settings of classes. I don't know why since I was young, but I felt really comfortable within that setting. So I would love to see more of that across universities, I guess. I don't know if that helps, but yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being here. Glad to have you. Anyone have any examples of ways that you're trying to restructure, reform curriculum in order to advance the concepts of decoloniality? Or anyone have experiences where they've been in courses that kind of reimagined or delinked from kind of the typical academic paradigm?
Can I maybe go, Ranel Carolison? Hi there, hi Tiffany. You know, I listened to the way in which you presented. You know, it's really amazing. You know what you've managed to achieve in this course, and I think it comes back to some of the basic principles that you know, context is all important. And that reflexivity within that context and the level of international global work that you've managed to do is basically constituted through who is in your class. I think that is a huge contribution. And I think not only in terms of your students, but then who you can bring in terms of what the virtual space makes possible. So those are really big takeaways. I think when I think of my own classes, I've used visual methodologies quite extensively in my own work to facilitate, in my own teaching, to facilitate reflexivity, but I teach almost exclusively South African sample. I'm based at the University of Stellenbosch in you know, half an hour's drive outside of Cape Town. And I teach a group that's largely South African with a small number of students, perhaps from Namibia and Zimbabwe, which are bordering countries in the, you know, sub-Saharan Africa. I think that the wide array of students from international countries, of course, including South Africa, makes for a very, very rich and vibrant kind of international experience. But I think one shouldn't undermine, perhaps, or I shouldn't undermine, perhaps, the value of learning that we can have from people from very different backgrounds who live in South Africa, that they can get from each other. So within that, I use, you know, we are still dealing with our separate and traumatic and racist past of legalized or legislated apartheid. You know, many years on post 1994, we're still dealing with all those challenges. You know, the huge inequities. In fact, this country has the highest level of inequity, you know, in the world still. And that has also been exacerbated by COVID. And we just reeling yet again under a third wave of COVID, you know, a resurgence of COVID. in the country, and particularly in the northern parts, Johannesburg, and so all of those kinds of issues impact on how we teach and what we teach. So as I was saying earlier, the methodologies that I use are visual methodologies, so photo, voice, drawings, are basically rivers of life. Whereas I noticed that you look at journeys, and some of those journeys are actual physical journeys that cross transnational space. And so it's interesting in thinking about my own work in relation to the kind of work that you're doing. But it's really, really fantastic. And I'm very impressed to hear this exciting ways that you're incorporating in teaching community psychology. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Natalie?
Thank you. Sorry, I was hiding behind a lens cap there. Thank you, everyone. This was amazing. And my question, I think, is a bit logistical. I'm thinking, you know, every program has different course offerings, different expectations. And I'm faculty at Laurier, and we only have, which feels lighter than work, because I went to the University of Miami, I took all these courses in all these different places. Our PhD students take 5 courses, you know, multi-level modeling, qualitative methods, 2 theory courses, and program evaluation. So we have these 2 theory courses that we get to play with, and I teach the second one. And when I've taught it before, I've done not nearly as comprehensively and as intentionally and as creatively as you have in this course, but I opened the course with a few weeks kind of focused in on this, you know, decolonial perspectives. And then we still go through some of the really traditional community psych stuff, ecological theory, all of these things. And so I'm just wondering, A, how this course fits with the rest of your curriculum, or if you have just chosen to say, learning how to learn is so much more important than picking up, you know, the traditional theories along the way, giving the tools for you to then engage in those theories on your own through your dissertation or your comp or all of those things. And just wondering how you've navigated, like, perhaps taking away from the perspective of program or administrators or whatnot, particular knowledges that are expected for you to kind of engage with your students.
Yeah, no, good questions. And I think there's something to be said for tenure, and that I have a little bit more freedom to be fugitive in the way that I teach in these courses, as I'm not monitored as much, I'd say, and especially teaching at the doctoral level. Like, we have quite a bit of freedom. We aren't, and I do all the program assessment for the doctoral program, so I choose what data sort of matters in the view of the institution overall, because we do have a lot of monitoring that goes on, but doctoral education in general it has a lot of freedom, and so we really try to use that as much as possible. I think the cross-cultural communications course is one of the earlier courses in the first year of the doctoral program. We felt it was super important, and thinking about most of our students coming in from the Chicagoland area originally. My first 8 years at the institution, it was almost all Chicago based. So when we thought about all the diverse folks that would come into a classroom, physically to a classroom, and thinking about which communities they might be coming from in the area, it just seemed important that we really address cross-cultural communication and dynamics within this urban space. And so a lot of it was really focused on that. But since we've opened it up to this international group, it brought up a whole other set of questions. It's like, oh my gosh, how do we think about the globe? How do we think about people in different locations? What does it mean to have a student from Cairo? What does it mean to have a student in Nova Scotia? And putting them together in a learning setting. So yeah, I mean, it just seems like cross-cultural analysis in some way, and our self-reflexivity as an instructor and the students and all of us together. And I also think, you know, our program has this long-term vision that, you know, we're never going to lose contact with the people that come through our program experience, and that we're co-learners in this journey of time together. And so if we want to really learn each other and understand, we have to spend the time focusing on this content. It's just so necessary. and really questioning everything. And I feel the decolonial frame of this course was really, it really helped us to really build on the strengths more and see why it's so hard to be strengths-based in some cases. And it really blew up the whole thing when you think about the history of, you know, what is it we're supposed to be learning about culture? It's historically about classification and divergence. And you know, that's not really what we're trying to do. We're trying to build community, right? And if we're trying to build a global community that really addresses these larger dynamics that we need to address, like how do we do that together? I don't know if that answers your question.
It did, and I just would love to ask a brief kind of follow-up. I know we've had some conversations with Chris about this idea of like co-creating courses across programs, and so that we're not all recreating the wheel. And I love that you shared today and that you're willing to share your syllabus with us. And I'm wondering if there's any plans or thoughts or intention after this to like build a community of learners or something so that we can be kind of building these courses in our CP programs and pushing back against some of the colonial structures that we're working within, because I think we can feel super isolated. I'm pre-tenure, you know, there are all these different kind of power things playing into this.
Yep.
But, you know, I would love to see my theory course kind of reflected in some of the things that you're talking about today, but I would have to ask a million more questions to be able to kind of do it in a way that does it justice. So I'm just kind of wondering what the next steps are for all of you in sharing the work.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, I've had the same conversations with Chris about this, and we don't know where this is going to go. We want to write something up about this sort of transnational teaching experience and what we've learned about what it means to host this kind of content within the Australia context for his program, being a Master's of Psychology program for predominantly white Australian students, and then for me, a very different urban setting, international program, very diverse student body. You know, how does the content really sit across these two regions, and does it have a similar effect? You know, just things like that have come up in our mind. You know, how does this concept of decoloniality even sit with us differently? But yeah, I mean, I think we've been talking in the Council on Ed. I know Eric on the Council of Education has been wanting to do some sort of exchange, sort of learning setting somehow. And now that we have this Zoom platform, it just seems like we could really make the most of this, and we've really seen the capacity of it. You know, how can we create this, maybe an exchange experience, or like an exchanging of a course or a creation of a course that can kind of plug into different courses and different programs that kind of counts as one of your courses, and maybe it's an elective. I don't know, but maybe there's some way that the SCRA organization can create an educational platform in that way.
Thanks for all of it.
All right, so it's past time. I can't believe that 75 minutes went by so quickly. We did start a few minutes late. But I don't know if everyone's familiar with the features, the chatting, networking features in the Open Water platform, but if people want to continue chatting more about this, we can start a group and chat more about our experience. And thank you all for attending. Everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you all.
I have